What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one-armed madman. And back with me today from the Liberty Lighthouse, we've got the great Peter Serifen. Peter, I had to get you back on. It's election week. We're doing the Election Week Extravaganza here on Too Hard for the Radio. I'm doing anything possible to get people watching. So if I got to come up with a crazy name, I will do it.
Well, it's always my pleasure to come hang out with the one-armed man for a little bit. But I'm not really the right guy to have on for elections because I don't like the way we do them now. I think I'm the constitutional originalist
Yeah.
guy. And in the Constitution, there's only one person that we are supposed to vote for and elect, and that's our member of the House of Representatives. So people want to argue about, who's president,
Hey,
your
just
state can.
just because it's the election week extravaganza does not mean we have to talk about the election. Right? Like we start with the election and then we kind of just move along. Where are you from? I don't know that I've ever asked where you live.
Pennsylvania, Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, right smack in the middle of the state.
Nice. So like I live in Idaho, the future free state of Greater Idaho to be exact. And like if you ask me, so like I'm last 2020 election, I thought Dems are going to cheat and win. That was it. Now I have a pretty different feeling. And like, I don't know that it's because I'm in an echo chamber on the internet and because I'm in an echo chamber living in Idaho that I feel like it's kind of a foregone conclusion that he's going to go in. But like, what's the temperature like in Pennsylvania right now? It's hard to trust anything that's said on the corporate news. So I'd like to hear it from you.
All right. Well, I live in Bellefonte, which is right outside of State College, Pennsylvania. Now, if you've ever looked at the electoral map of Pennsylvania, there's like any state, there's the blue pocket around Philly, and there's the blue pocket around Pittsburgh, a little bit of blue around Harrisburg. Basically, the cities are blue. But there's also a blue area right smack in the middle, Center County. That's where Penn State University is. And that's my county. Penn State's 8 miles down the road. I'm a pretty blue area. I'm also a mailman in my regular day job. So my life sucks the last couple of weeks. I am a mailman in a swing state
Yeah.
delivering election mail every day, like 5 cards or posters or whatever, every stinking day to almost everybody. It's crazy. I can't give you a feeling of what I think is going to happen to the state. What I can say is if I drive the 8 miles over to State College, I see a whole lot more Harris Wall signs. And then when you come over my way to Bellefonte, it starts to be more Trump signs. And if you keep going down the road a couple more miles to the next town, it's almost entirely Trump signs. So, like anywhere, it's the team mentality of blue team cities, red team rural.
Yeah, it's the same thing here. I mean, the biggest hurdle right now for Greater Idaho, aside from the federal government, is Boise. Boise doesn't want it. They don't want to lose their voting, power that they have, right? They have very little power because, Idaho is so red that like they struggle to do anything outside of their own border, right? But like, yeah, it's wild. So like I'm an anarchist. I'm not a voter. I've never voted in my life, so therefore I have a perfect voting record according to me. Um, and like I've never liked the lesser of two evil argument. Like, oh, this one's just so much worse than this one. And I have to say, this is the first time in my life where I feel like that argument is out the window. Like even as an anarchist, as someone who like hates government and thinks that these are a bunch of organized criminal gangs set up to rob and steal from us, to enrich themselves and turn us into debt slaves. Like I feel like one is clearly better than the other right now. And I wonder, like, from the point like of a constitutionalist, if you see things in the same way as I do.
Well, I got a phone call from a Democrat pollster the other day.
I get 50 a day.
Yeah. Well, I'm registered to the Constitution Party, so I am a registered voter, but I'm not registered as a Democrat or a Republican, so most people call me an independent. I get a call from the Center Democrats, the Democrat Party of Center County, and they go on to, I'm so and so, I'm a volunteer, da, 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 da. And I strongly support Kamala Harris, and I hope you do too. And I said, absolutely not. I said, the Democrat Party has gone off the deep end, and I can't support anything that they do. And then I said, I'm a constitutional originalist. I believe that there are 18 powers granted to Congress in the Constitution, and everything else they do is unconstitutional and illegal. And she said, "Oh, so you'd rather vote for the guy who said he'd tear up the Constitution?" And I stopped her right there. I said, "That guy that you're talking about, he said a whole bunch of stupid things, but he never did any of them. The guy in the White House now stood at a podium and said, all of my constitutional experts are telling me that this is unconstitutional, but I'm going to do it anyway."
Yeah. And it gets
And,
shot down by the Supreme Court, and they try
and then he
again.
does it again anyway.
Try it
Yeah.
again.
And I brought that up, and I said, and then he does it. It gets shot down by the Supreme Court, and he does it 2 more times. I said, on one hand, I got a guy that says stupid stuff, and the other hand, I got a guy who does stupid stuff. I don't want either of them.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you, man. And one of the most disappointing parts of this election has been the Libertarian Party to me, because I consider myself a bit of a libertarian. I've never been a member of the party, but like they've been a party of cucks for the past my entire life, right? Like you know it, I know it. They're a bunch of cucks. They get nothing done. They whine and complain about theory. And a lot of times they're not even like true to theory. Their theory branches clearly away from like Rothbard and Hoppe, and they go down this weird open borders, abortion for everyone type of deal.
What?
And
They've actually cleaned up a little bit.
that's where I was going. The Mises Caucus comes in, they take over the party, they clear out all the bad shit. And this should have been the year, right? For the libertarians to come out and say, we are the actual libertarians. We hold the keys to the third largest party in the country, and we're going to put somebody out there that's going to kill it. They're not going to win. They may not even get 20%, but we're going to put somebody out there that can get on all the good shows and talk about liberty. Dave Smith was that guy. And he decided not to run because of family reasons. He's a comedian. He's not a politician. I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to do anything like that. But they end up putting Chase Oliver in, who nobody's ever heard of, has zero ability to get the message out. He can't get on any of these big shows. Dave's been on Joe Rogan half a dozen times since Chase took the nomination. I've never even seen an interview with Chase because the people that I watch don't even have him on. And it was just such a disappointment. I'm going to actually read this real quick because it was really funny. So this is a tweet from Chase Oliver. I 100% condemn the statement from LPNH regarding Kamala Harris. It's absurd, abhorrent, and should never have been posted. As libertarians, we condemn the use of force, whether committed by governments, individuals, political entities, blah, blah, blah. You kind of get it. And what they said was, fuck off and read any book on libertarianism, you fucking cock, or something like that. And who cares? And the response from the Libertarian Party, I thought, was a very good response as well. They said, we have no problem with gay people. We don't like Chase Oliver because he's a faggot, not because he's gay. And that's what's going on right now. This last 3 elections were the perfect time for a third party candidate. And we got Gary Johnson, what's her name, that I can't even remember her name anymore, and Chase Oliver. George Jorgensen, who said it's not enough to be not racist. We have to be anti-racist.
Right, which
means nothing.
No, that's word salad stuff there.
Yes.
The first time around, you mentioned Gary Johnson. I voted Gary Johnson.
A lot of people did.
I looked at my 2 choices and thought, well, at least the stoners never started a war, and that's where I went. But look at the Constitution Party. Do you know who they put up this time?
No.
Yeah, no, nobody does. His name's Randall Terry.
I didn't know there was a constitutional party.
Yep.
That's how bad they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Libertarian Party actually offsprung from the Constitution Party.
Wow. I did not know that at all. That's
Yeah,
wild.
back in the 1990s, the Constitution Party was then called the Taxpayer Party, and it was getting big and it was getting power. And then, of course, the shady stuff started to happen, and the infiltrators came in and kind of just destroyed the party. And part of it spun off and became the Libertarian Party, and then part of it became the Constitution Party. The Constitution Party put up Randall Terry, who's an independently wealthy guy. I don't remember why he's wealthy, what he did, but his life's mission is basically to end abortion, and he has made that basically the entire platform of his campaign, which means
That's a bad
he,
running position.
yep,
It's just
he's
a
not going to
bad,
get anywhere.
yeah.
So here, let's talk about why third parties can't get anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a valid art of discussion to have. And it's really easy to point blame. The blame is the Democrats and the Republicans. They have created all of the rules, and they've made these entry barriers, like you have to get so many signatures to get on a ballot. You got to get this or that, whatever the ballot requirements are in each individual state. So oftentimes third parties can't get on a ballot, and if they can, they can't sustain it. So once you get on a ballot, you have to be able to draw a certain percentage of the vote, and it depends. It's different rules, different states. So let's say you got your 20,000 signatures or whatever you needed to have a presidential candidate on in your state. Well, the next time a presidential election comes around, if you didn't poll a certain percentage, let's say 5%, if you didn't poll 5% of the vote last time, you got to go through the whole process again to get on it again this time. Nobody wants to do that every 4 years.
No, it's
It's almost
ridiculous.
impossible. So then, so that's just the rules to get on the ballot. Then let's look at the Electoral College. The U.S. Constitution says that each state gets the number of electors for the Electoral College that matches the number of people they have in Congress. So House of Representatives plus senators added together, that's how many votes your state gets in the Electoral College. But that's all it says. Your state gets to decide how to award those Electoral College votes. Somewhere over the last 250 years, every state has decided that we, the people, are going to vote to determine where those Electoral College votes go. Great. There's not in the Constitution. Your state could change that. Tomorrow, Idaho could say, you know what? You guys are a bunch of idiots. We're going to do it here at the State House. And there's really nothing you could do about it. I mean, that's just the rules. They could do that. So then they had this Electoral College thing. And then over the course of time, somehow 48 of the 50 states have decided that they want to make their state all or nothing. So if you win Pennsylvania, you get all 19 electoral college votes. But what's the Nebraska? Nebraska does it differently. And I personally believe Nebraska does it in the most fair and Republican manner possible. Small r Republican,
Yeah.
like Republican form of government,
Yeah, I
not
get you.
Republican Party.
Yeah.
Nebraska says, okay, each congressional district in our state is worth one electoral vote. And then whoever wins the statewide vote gets two additional votes. So if you think about
Interesting.
it in the representatives, each congressional district represents one person in the House of Representatives and one electoral college vote. And then when you award all of those, you've got two left that associate to the two members of the Senate. So you get like a two vote bonus if you win the statewide election. Now, why? Before I go into my hypothetical why question,
Yeah.
think about how that affects you as a candidate running for office in one particular state. So I want to be president, and I want to go win Nebraska. I can't just do one huge rally. I've got to worry about
Go,
each individual
yeah.
district.
You got to go all the way around the state.
Got to go all the way around the state, right? And you as a voter in Nebraska, let's say you're a a I don't know, a progressive Democrat. You're a progressive Democrat, and your district is progressive Democrat, but your state as a whole is Republican. So if you're a Democrat living in a Republican state,
Boise.
right, Boise, your vote is worthless
Yep.
because you're never going to have enough votes to overturn the tide of the whole state. But if in the way that Nebraska does it, the state as a whole is red. But just like every other state, there's that one city, Omaha. Omaha's blue. So you can go to Nebraska and win. I don't remember how many votes they have,
One or
but
two.
let's say you go there and you could win the 2
It,
electoral votes for this, and then you lose the one from Omaha, and then the other 2 is a toss up as to who wins them. So it would be possible to split the vote. So more equal, more fair representation to you as a voter.
more democratic in a
Right.
way. In a way.
But, but still Republican
Yes.
in Republican in elected representation,
Yes.
not Democratic as in mob rule.
Exactly. It's democratic as in spread out.
Right. And what's another big reason that you would want your state to be all or nothing? Well, one, it's more attention for your state. If Pennsylvania was divvied up and there were 17 different districts plus 2 bonus ones,
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah, it'd get maybe it
And
goes half
and
Democrat
we
and
get
half
nothing
Republican or
here.
whatever.
Nobody
Yeah,
comes to Idaho to campaign ever
right.
because it's pointless for both parties.
So by going all or nothing, your state has kind of guaranteed a little bit more attention. So I mean, I can't imagine how many millions of dollars that have been spent in Pennsylvania over the last few weeks. Millions and
Has to
millions.
be just maybe even 100 million.
So it
you know,
wouldn't surprise me
more
at all.
even. Like they're spending an insane amount of money.
Right. So that's one reason that a state does that is the all or nothing thing
Yeah.
is so they get more attention. But another reason is the party politic itself. Democrats and Republicans control who gets on the ballots. And if you, as a libertarian, or me as a constitutionalist, or Jill Stein you can't get electoral college votes because it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
Imagine if all 50 states did something kind of like Nebraska, not necessarily exactly like Nebraska, but something like that, where their electoral college votes were apportioned in some way. It would be possible for a third party to win electoral college votes,
Yeah.
thereby draw attention
And
and potentially
it would also
earn.
give those states leverage that we don't have. Like you said, Pennsylvania has leverage. They're saying, "Hey, look, if you want our vote, we need A, B, and C." Where we don't have that leverage here in Idaho.
Yeah, but it's just, I don't know. But that this is not something that can be done at the federal level. This is something that each state would have to decide to do. But the way that the Democrats and Republicans have decided to dole out electoral votes has solidified their role as the only 2 parties,
Which is how they want it.
which is exactly how they want it.
Because it's
Yeah.
really just one party for the most part. You get rid of Trump and like the establishment reigns. They do
Yeah.
what they're gonna do. And I mean, Trump governed like an establishment, Republican anyways. Like it's not like he went so far out of left field that you could say, oh, everything he did was completely different. Like, no, we still printed trillions of dollars and
Yeah.
gun control kept going. Like there's a lot of shit that went down under Trump's presidency where you could go, this guy was not an outside candidate.
Right.
Clearly, right?
Now, a lot of people are saying that
Or maybe he
hopefully
was an outside candidate, but not an outside president.
there's a lot of people out there now that are fingers crossed, hoping that he learned his lessons the first time. He knows who he can and can't trust. He knows
Yeah.
who to appoint to roles and all that, and he'll be able to do more of the shake up the establishment
Yeah.
stuff if he wins. Yeah,
I don't
we'll
believe
see.
it either. Like, I have zero faith that he's going to do it. You know what I mean? Like, there's
I
so
got.
much.
I do have to say, I would love to see Elon Musk put in charge of efficiency.
Yeah, that'd be
That
awesome.
sounds
Just
freaking
start
awesome.
firing people. I
You know,
don't care. You know?
look at what he did to Twitter. He fired what 68% of the staff or
Yeah.
something like that, and then added more functionality to the product.
And made it way more fun. Like, look at the tweet that I just read where they called Chase a faggot. Like, that would not have flown underneath the
Ooh.
previous owners of Twitter. No freaking way. You are off forever, you know, cast out. So I wrote down some of her, I guess, whatever you could. She doesn't believe in anything, you know. In the beginning, I was calling her a nihilist, but I don't think that's correct either. I think that she's just an old school authoritarian. You know, she believes in sucking dick and getting power. Like, that's all she really cares about. And I was wondering how some of her, I guess, like, positions would fare out in constitutionality. So, like, the first one, the filibuster. How does that, you know, she wants to get rid of the filibuster. How does that fly with the
It's
Constitution?
not in the Constitution. It's not in there at all. The closest the Constitution comes is it says that each house, meaning the House of Representatives and the Senate, get to make their own rules. The filibuster isn't in there, and yeah, they could get rid of it. If you read the writings of the founders, the Senate is supposed to be the slower, more deliberative body to temper the fleeting whims of elected officials and the populace. See, remember the House of Representatives is directly elected by us and always has been, and they're elected every 2 years. So it's quite possible that one day we all wake up and we decide, hey, we're all progressives. We're going to put 535 or 435 progressive members of the House, and the Senate's going to be like, oh, slow down there, Sparky. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
And then, 2 years later, they might say, well, that progressive thing didn't work. Let's get a whole bunch of conservative constitutionalist folks, and we're going to do that. The House moves quickly. The Senate moves slowly, both in elections and in process. That's its purpose. But they each make their own rules. So getting rid of the filibuster, I think, is a bad idea
I
because it's a way.
I would agree, just because the only time I ever see anybody use it is like Thomas Massey or Rand Paul.
Yeah.
So that tells me it's pretty good.
The filibuster has really changed, though. I mean, it used to be a filibuster was you got up there and you talked until you couldn't talk anymore. You picked up whatever book you happened to have, like this here, Trust Shattered book, and you just stood there and you read in front of Congress. There's stories of people reading cookbooks and phone books and all kinds of stuff, just standing there. There's stories of senators, having catheters put in so that they could stand there longer. There's, taking
Wow.
taking the opposite of a laxative. What's what
You know, like caffeine or something or
you know,
concert.
some,
Yeah. 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 I know what you're talking about.
something to keep them so they
Yeah.
don't have to
Yeah.
go to the bathroom. Like
Opioids.
there's yeah. um, but that's the way the filibuster used to be. Is basically you just sucked up all the time.
Yeah.
You stood there and made it so that either people just gave up or you ran the clock out. Like, oh, session's over,
Yep.
and you
Sorry.
still
Can't vote
talk.
today.
Yeah. Um, Now the filibuster is this thing where party leadership goes uh, filibuster, and by saying it, that means now you've got to get 60 votes instead of 50.
That's,
That's all it is. It's
yeah.
it's like a procedural move.
Yeah. That's
So it
weird.
might be fun to see the old-fashioned filibuster, like
Yeah, no, I'd love to see that. I've
Mr.
seen
Smith
Rand
goes to
Paul do it
Washington.
like that one time where he just got up there, and I think it was when he was trying to get a like inspector general to check all the money that was going to Ukraine, and everybody's like, no, no, we don't want that. And he just kind of got up there and talked about war and money, and it was great. I think he went on for like an hour or so, which is again like not like what you were saying, where somebody's
No,
just going
no.
to go on for like 6 hours about liberty or something, like, or cooking or whatever.
Yeah, and they would do it. I mean, and if you had it right, like if you had a caucus of people, like I'll go up there, I'll stand for 8 hours, and then when I pass out,
Your turn.
the next guy stands up and
Yeah.
talks for 8. Like the filibuster is there to protect minority rights, not minority based on skin color. Minority is in voting power. Our entire government is structured to protect the minority from being dominated by the majority. That was the founders' fear of democracy, was was that the majority would power over the minority.
Yeah. The
But
have-nots will always take from the haves.
yeah, and that's why we have it our government set up the way we do. That's why we have, the two-chambered legislature. That's why we have different ways of electing all of our elected officials. It was to protect the minorities from being trampled on.
Here's one that really terrifies me as a former lineman, apprentice lineman. I don't want to piss off any actual linemen. Nationalizing the energy grid. I've never heard her specifically say this, but I have heard other people talk about her wanting to do this. That one terrifies me.
Well, there's a lot of things that terrify me, but I want to go back to James Madison and the General Welfare Clause. Okay, first off, what benefit to nationalizing the energy grid? What's the point? What's the purpose? Oh, well, it's the general welfare. We, the federal government, can do it better than you, I'm sure. James Madison in 1791. Yeah, 1791. The codfish bailout. Have I ever told you that story
Mm-mm.
before?
No.
Okay, so 1791, the codfish industry in New England is failing. They just overfished or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
Codfish industry's failing, and somebody puts forth a bill in Congress that says, um, "Hey, this is pretty important industry. It's going to hurt a lot of people if it fails. Maybe we should give them some federal money." Now, at this point, 1791, this is 5 years after the Constitution is written, and James Madison, the guy that wrote it, is a member of the House of Representatives. So he's like, "Excuse me," and he goes on. Part of his speech says that that's not one of the enumerated powers of the Constitution. And the general welfare is associated with those enumerated powers of the Constitution. If we in Congress can spend money on whatever we want for the general welfare, and we are the sole judges of what is the general welfare, then we have no limits to our Constitution. We can take over the roads other than post roads. We can hire teachers and teach out of the public funds. Everything from, oh, I can't remember the whole, all the way down to the most minute detail of policing will fall under the general welfare. This was a warning by James Madison to Congress 5 years after the Constitution was written about, if you use the general welfare for all of these things, we don't have a limited government anymore. And it's exactly what our government has done, obviously. So I would say, what's the justification for nationalizing the electric grid? Because to me, no.
It's going to be
It,
climate change. That's going to be their
of course it is.
you know.
Also not in the Constitution. Oh, and another thing about that, back to Madison's 1791 speech. At the end of the whole thing, he's he says, if the people want us to do this, then amend the Constitution. Give
General
us that
welfare.
free.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
No,
I was just going to say general welfare just seems like the most subjective term they could possibly come up with. Like nothing pisses me off more a lot of the time than when they just throw out these subjective
mm-hmm.
terms and then, you know, label themselves the arbiter of truth, right? We
Right.
say that this is great and it's so dumb to me. Like
Yeah.
these
Right. Which is why you got to go back to Madison and read what he says about the general welfare.
yeah.
Like he made these. He's the guy who wrote. I'm actually in the middle of writing a lecture right now. It'll probably be like a 15-minute little video lecture that'll go on my website when I'm done, of why Madison should be considered the premier source anytime you want to know anything about the Constitution. And there's a lot of reasons, not just that he's the guy that wrote it down, but he argued about the general welfare in multiple places. In the Federalist Papers, he says that the federal government, the powers granted to the federal government are few and defined. and those that are left to the states are numerous and plentiful, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the Codfish bailout that I just mentioned, there's a letter to Edmund Pendleton where he said almost the same thing that he said in that debate about the codfish industry. And then when he was president, this is one of my favorite stories. The bonus bill of 1817, I think. Anyway, James Madison is president. The very last day that he's in office, a bill lands on his desk from Congress to fund roads and canals and infrastructure projects. Now that's something Madison has been talking about for years. He was president during the War of 1812. He was like, we need roads.
Yeah.
So this is something he really wants. The bill lands on his desk the very last day he's president. So he's got three choices. He can sign it, he can veto it, or he can leave it on the desk for Adams, who's going to take over next. Because he's got, you got 10 days.
Yeah. Lame duck.
Mm-hmm. He vetoes the bill, even though it's exactly what he wanted politically. He vetoed it. And in his explanation, he says, as much as I would like to see infrastructure in our country, it's not one of the powers granted to us in the Constitution. If the people want us to do this, amend the Constitution. Veto.
What a badass.
Right? Could you imagine any elected official doing that today?
No.
Hey, look, here's a bill that gives you exactly what you've been wanting for years. Nope, sorry.
People were so badass back then. Oh, man. So I'm not nearly as versed on this, but I just based on like how you're explaining this, I would imagine that one of my least favorite functions of government probably stemmed from the general welfare clause. When I worked up in North Dakota, we stole a lot of Native Americans' land because, wouldn't you know, we've got to build power lines to the well sites. And we used eminent domain to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I don't think it's right. I don't think any of that's right.
It's
I don't
disgusting.
think the federal government. This is going to be a little bit into the libertarian part of you.
Ooh, here we go.
Why does the federal government own national parks? The Constitution lists out like 5 reasons that the federal government can own land. And they're like, the seat of government in Washington, no more than 10 miles square. Magazines and shipyards and arsenals and military bases and courthouses. And that's like it. And then it ends with other needful buildings. So it says, these are the reasons that you could. Is a park a needful building?
Needful. What a word.
Yeah, but needful building specifically.
Yeah.
Not needful property.
Yeah.
Needful building. Do you need a courthouse? Yes, you need a courthouse. Do you need a tax collector's office? Probably. Do you need a national park? No. Then to take that a step further, reading the Constitution, it spells out how the federal government can get these lands. And part of it is it has to be agreed to by the state legislature of the state where they're getting it. Montana. What's the giant
Yellowstone.
It's like what, 2/3 of the state of Montana.
Massive.
It's massive park. That was established as a national park while Montana was still a territory.
Really? I didn't know that.
So wait. So the Constitution says the federal government can't take land from a state except by permission from the state legislature, but it wasn't a state yet. There was no state legislature. You created a national park, which wasn't a needful building, unconstitutional.
Capitalists in California made a massive mistake in the late 1800s by cutting down the redwoods. And, it was a major mistake. Like, I think any libertarian would agree to me on that. It's like they made a massive mistake by cutting down a valuable resource that did not need to be used for building materials. And I think that, like, if you would ask a liberal that same question, they go, well, we have to protect these parks from the evil capitalists that are just going to strip them for their resources. And I
Well,
would counter with, like, we learned our lesson with the redwoods. We are smarter than that now, and the capitalists are going to come in. They're going to take better care of that park. They're going to build better structures, and it's going to be a much better experience. And guess what? If the government decides that a fake virus or something comes out, they won't be able to limit how many people come in. Like, it'll be private property, and they'll just have the right to do that.
well, see, I'm not. You're going a step further than me. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
not saying that that government can't own parks. I'm saying that the federal government can't own parks.
I got you. I got
I'm
you.
not anti-government. I'm anti-centralized, established, entrenched
Central control.
central, central control of power. See, if your state has state parks and you in your state decide, you know what, that's too many state parks. We want to get rid of some, or we need more, whatever. The consensus of your state, you elect the people that can do that. It's a lot easier to elect and remove people at the state level than it is the federal level.
Yeah, for sure.
Those people are closer. I know my state reps, they live right down the street. I've never met my federal rep. I know who he is. I know where his office is, but I've never seen him in town. I see my state reps, both Senate and House, in town. So if the state wants a park, okay. If your county or town wants a park, okay. Federal government has no legal authority to own parks.
So here's an interesting one.
Mhm.
We've got Trump floating out the idea of getting rid of income taxes altogether, which I don't believe that he'll do for a second, but I like that, at least he's talking about it. And then on the other side, we've got Kamala saying she's going to tax unrealized gains,
Yeah, those could not be more bipolar opposites,
right?
are they? Um, I'm sure you, like me, you probably think income taxes is basically communist. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's theft.
number 2 in the Communist Manifesto. It's an unjust redistribution of wealth. I love the idea of getting rid of income tax. Even
So
if
great.
even if that was his only goal, he would never be able to get it done.
No.
So don't hold your breath, anybody.
No, like I said, I don't believe it for a second, but could you imagine every person in this country getting a 40% raise on day one?
Right?
It would just be incredible for everybody.
And that's the other, like, I'm sure you've heard of the fair tax, right?
I don't know.
Right. So fair tax is a sales tax idea. And it's a national sales tax on all new goods and services, and it replaces all other forms of federal income. So it gets rid of inheritance tax and fuel taxes and tariffs and import taxes and income taxes and social security tax, and it gets rid of all federal taxes, replaces it with a sales tax. Now, personally, I think a sales tax is the only equitable tax there is, because you get to decide how much you spend. Therefore, you get to decide how much tax you're paying. You buy the $2,000 used car, you buy the $200,000 new car. You set your own tax bill. So the fair tax decided, they did all the math and all the studies, and they figured out to eliminate all other forms of federal tax, the sales tax would have to be like 25% or something like that, which sounds horrible. But they did all of the math, and it is a net zero to you and I, the consumer. It's a wash. You get to keep your whole paycheck, but then you have to pay more for everything else. So it's a wash. It doesn't fix the overspending problem of Washington by any stretch of the matter, but it gives you a little bit more control over how much tax you pay. The problem with media is that when that idea came up like last year, and I think Trump had mentioned it, maybe it was one of the Senate candidates, I don't remember. Somebody brought up the idea of a fair tax, and media ran with it as they want a sales tax on top of everything else that you already pay. And it was just dishonest.
Wait a
It would
minute.
be,
The government's being dishonest. I can't believe that.
oh no, it wasn't the government being dishonest.
Oh,
It's
really? I'm sorry.
the media being
Oh, the
dishonest, which is
media, even
so
even
much more.
even less likely. Now I don't know if I can even buy this.
I know you probably shouldn't even have me on the show anymore. I'm gonna spew lies like this.
You know, if you had a if you got a CNN, you know, to do a little deal about the Liberty Lighthouse, then maybe I'd be into
Oh,
it.
you
But
want me to change my background? Is
no,
that what you're
no, we're
saying? So I forget where
I know.
the,
I'm sorry. I
the
couldn't
idea of
help myself.
getting rid of income tax sounds fantastic. Repeal the 16th Amendment,
Mhm.
but you got to replace it with something, because the idea that you think that the federal government is going to cut spending by 90% and get rid of the income tax, that's just insane. I've got a park in Montana to sell you if that's the
Oh shit.
but go to Kamala's, unrealized capital gains. Oh my God, you couldn't. Sorry,
Yeah, no. I mean, I would be screwed.
you
I'd be so
can't
screwed.
get more communist than that. I don't think everybody out there understands what that means. So everybody knows what capital, or they've at least heard what capital gains is. Capital gains is when you buy something and then you sell it for a profit. I live in Pennsylvania. I said that earlier. I recently, I don't know, a year or so ago, I bought a house really cheap, like dirt cheap. Like, really? Let me write you a check now.
Yeah.
Cheap. And then I flipped it. Now, had I flipped it within 2 years, my capital gains tax would have been 35% or something like that. Meaning I would have to pay 35% of the profit for doing it within 2 years. But if you wait more than 2 years, that tax drops down to 15%. Okay. Why is that different? Why are they punishing somebody who's able to make a profit quickly on capital gains, for one? For two, the idea of unrealized capital gains would be, I bought that other house and I never sold it, but it went up in value.
Yep.
I have to pay for how much it went up in value. That's your 401k.
Yeah. My
You,
house
you
my house went up 40% during COVID.
oh yeah. My house
I
is
would have
more
had to
than
sell it to pay those taxes.
right. My house is more than tripled since I bought it, and I've owned it less than 10 years. I mean, it had been vacant for 10 years when I got it. So all I had to do was put a roof on it, paint it, and it doubled in value. So yeah, I wouldn't be able to afford the taxes if they made me, oh, your house went up $100,000.
Yeah.
You owe us
40.
15%. Oh,
Yeah.
I know you didn't sell your house. You're still living it. We already have a problem with taking away houses from especially the elderly people in
Yeah.
this country. As taxes go up, they can't afford to pay more property tax because they're living on Social Security because they were conned into believing that they could do that.
Yeah.
And then when they can't pay their taxes, the state takes their house. Now you're going to tax them on the unrealized capital gains. My grandmother bought My grandfather went to Europe in World War II. He's a soldier in Europe. He doesn't need money. He sent his money back to grandma. So for the year or two or whatever it was that he was in Europe, grandma like, oh, I don't need that money. I'm working as a waitress down at the salt factory and I live at home with my parents. I don't need that money. So she just put it away. When grandpa came back from the war, they had enough money to buy a house, just outright bought it. And granted, you buy a house back then for like $5,000.
Yeah.
But can you imagine? You buy the house for $5,000. You spend the rest of your life working. You retire. Your house is probably worth $200,000 now. You can't pay that's insane.
Yeah. You know,
Paying taxes on the value of something going up.
my mom bought a house when she was a senior in high school.
Wow.
Imagine just today, a senior in high school being able to buy.
Mhm.
I don't know that I would bet money, in fact, that there's not a single state in this country where the average high school senior could buy a house.
No, no, absolutely not.
And to
And the
me,
median home price.
this whole like unrealized gains deal, this is just another way to get BlackRock into the real estate game. Oh,
Oh,
you
yeah,
can't afford to pay your unrealized gains? Great. BlackRock's they're going to offer you 10% above retail. Good for
yeah,
you. You won. Except now you're just a renter for life.
yeah.
Oh, man. What about the border? What does the Constitution say about the border?
Basically, the Constitution says that Congress has the authority to set immigration law. Actually, no, let me rephrase that. Naturalization law. They can set up the rules for naturalization. The word immigration isn't in the Constitution, but they set the rules for naturalization. And consistently, the courts have agreed that naturalization and immigration are synonymous. So Congress makes the rules for immigration. So what law is there right now? What law is on the book now? Law passed by Congress, through the House, through the Senate, signed by the president. Law, not policy by the immigrations and customs people. The law says that it is illegal to cross the border, is a misdemeanor offense to cross the border outside of a port of entry. And if you are caught crossing the border outside of a port of entry, you are to be detained and deported. After your first offense, it becomes detained, imprisoned, and deported. That's the law as passed by Congress. But as we all know, the policy, as meaning do we or do we not enforce these laws, swims with whatever president's in the White House. So for Kamala to stand there and say, well, we had a new bill, a border bill that would have secured it. No, you just got to enforce the law that's there now.
And there was a bunch of pork in that bill that made it bad.
Yeah, there's a bunch of pork in that bill that made it bad. And just again, didn't it did not enforce the law. The problem that we have in this country, one of the problems that we have in this country is that the executive branch of our government, i.e., the president, is charged with enforcing the law as written. But we, the people, have allowed them to create administrative law through executive action and decide which laws they will or will not enforce and what policies they're going to put around these laws. It's the president's job to arrest, detain, and deport anybody who crosses the border in between a port of entry. If you want to seek asylum, go to a port of entry.
So that was actually going to be one of my next question was going to be about Trump's border policy. And like one of the things that kind of freaks me out about his border and immigration policy is the mass deportation thing. And not because like I want our country to be overran with low income workers. Like I think that that's the major reason that they want the border open is they can suppress wages and, keep cranking in that profit. But the whole mass deportation thing creeps me out a bit. Like, I don't know if, like, that seems like a pretty good excuse for a massive federal police force that me and you would both not want. Um,
Don't want the federal police forces we already have.
but it also kind of sounds like all he really has to do is enforce the laws on the books, and that may not even be needed, and you could just use regular cops.
Yep.
Hmm, that's interesting.
I mean,
I didn't know
basically,
that.
and I agree. I mean, I don't think there's any need to go around door to door like, show me your green card.
Yeah.
But if you so much as get a jaywalking ticket, you need to be deported.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think
So,
that like right
you
wing
know,
America has a bit of a problem with immigration where they kind of are under the assumption that if we just got these people out of our country, we go back to the 1950s again, which
yeah,
is, and it's not even a proper view of how the 1950s actually were. It's always a nostalgic, type of view of
yeah,
it. And like, I just don't see that as the case. And in fact, like, I could see things getting a little bit worse after that deportation because there's going to be some, you know, hard times for wages to rebalance themselves out. And there's
yeah,
still a lot of jobs in this country that white people won't work.
yeah. That's how I've been told.
Yeah.
Although all the trash guys in my neighborhood are white.
Yeah, mine too. I mean,
Mhm.
that like I do know that there's a good portion of people in this country that don't wanna work because I rent rooms out at my house and I see them. You know, I see what they do. I hear them complain about getting fired for stupid reasons. Like, there is a decent amount of people in this country that don't
Why
wanna work.
why would you wanna work if you've been coddled your whole life and you're
Yeah,
told that all you gotta do is make it to 62 and they'll give you Social Security?
yeah.
Like, can you blame them? Not
It's
not really. I mean, I don't know that I'd have the same work ethic if I grew up today.
it's tough because you're working for nothing. There's no carrot. You know, you're not going to buy a house anytime soon. You're not going to like the prospects of a 17 to 19-year-old male who grew up in a poor family are slim to none. You know, you're not going to college. You're not getting a great job. You're really going to the military or you're working construction.
I don't know. I work for the post office. We're always hiring.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But a lot of those guys have a decent record that would not allow them to be hired by the post
No,
office, right?
no, that's one thing post office learned that lesson already. Uh,
Yeah. What do you think about this one hits home hard for me. Like I've heard both candidates say that they don't want to be arresting people for marijuana, but I've not heard anybody say that they're going to make it federally legal. How does that work out with the Constitution?
well, I would probably argue that it's
Wait,
not
real quick. The Constitution is written on hemp, by the way.
parchment.
Huh? Yeah, hemp parchment. The original. No, really? I heard that
Ooh,
the original Constitution was written on hemp.
no,
Okay, I believe
the
you
prints
because,
afterward. No, parchment back in that day was lambskin. I mean,
huh?
it was very expensive, lengthy process to make parchment. It involved stretching and skinning and tanning and stretching and tanning and it was really. I mean, there's like one company in America that still makes parchment, and it's crazy expensive.
Interesting.
Now the
Oh, yep. I
copies,
just looked it up because I trust you because you know a lot more about the Constitution than me. But right away it says no, this is not true. So interesting. I had always heard that it was. So I learned
now
something new.
the original 100 copies that were made afterwards, that could have been
Maybe.
a hemp based paper or something like that, but it was from a printer, so it was uh, uh,
Yeah. It says here that the drafts might have been written on hemp, but if they wrote the drafts, maybe the hemp was cheaper than the part.
oh my god, yes,
Whatever.
yeah, parchment is crazy expensive
Yeah, so that would
stuff.
make sense that if they're gonna do the rough copies on something cheaper and then put it on something
Yeah,
more hardy.
there's a weird law in England where anything that the queen or king now signs has to be on parchment.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it is such a long and expensive process to make it that there have been times when the queen, was like, "Where's my paper?" And like,
Yeah.
"No, we don't have any."
There's something cool about, like, an old school parchment scroll or something like that though, right?
Yeah, but parchment is basically oiled and tanned lamb's skin that's been stretched to be paper thin.
Peter, you're a wealth of information.
Mostly useless information. But I'm sorry, I forgot what your
I
question
don't
was.
I was asking about marijuana legalization.
Oh yeah, okay, marijuana. The only thing that you might be able to shoehorn into the Constitution in this way is under the Interstate Commerce Clause. Um, I, you could there's I'm not going to say a good argument, but there's a reasonable argument that could be made that yes, the federal government, should have the ability to decide which products are legal and illegal based off of the Interstate Commerce Clause. That being said, there is a push. I want to say, and I could have these backwards. I want to say the FDA has suggested that marijuana be dropped from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3.
Yes, I've read that as well.
Now, if the FDA has made that recommendation, it's then up to the DEA to basically say, okay, and do it that way. And I don't know if that's something that
No, that would, put a lot of them out of jobs, you know?
right.
If you're not knocking down doors to, you know, bust people for growing plants in their backyard, then you're gonna lose a lot. Yeah, I don't see it happening anytime soon, personally. It's just there's so much revenue in the prison system and the court system that there's just a lot of people that would be out of the job if they did it. And I would hope that sometime in my lifetime that we could see it happen. But again, like with the income tax, I'm not holding my breath, even if there's smoke in my lungs.
Well, for anybody out there who doesn't know, a Schedule One, according to the FDA, is something that has no medicinal use at all. It is just a worthless drug.
Yeah,
It
which is how Idaho views it, which is just unfortunate.
like morphine, for example, has a medicinal purpose.
Yeah.
Heroin does not. So heroin would be a Schedule One. Morphine would be a Schedule Two, which means yes, it's useful, but it has to be highly controlled. And then Schedule Three is like Tylenol.
Ah, gotcha. That should not even be on a list at all.
Well, it's actually like Tylenol 3 that has a
Yeah.
little bit of cocaine.
Yeah, I have actually taken Tylenol 3 before now that I think about it. Peter, why don't you tell us what's new with the Liberty Lighthouse, and then we'll get you out of
Oh,
here.
the Liberty Lighthouse is all new. I have completely rebuilt liberty-lighthouse.com. There is now uh, my well, I started posting my articles on my own website. So weekly articles on constitutional originalism and the founding fathers and what the different clauses mean. There are white papers to download. One of my favorite is the General Welfare Clause. It explains what James Madison thought the General Welfare Clause meant, the Necessary and Proper Clause. A couple of other, like 6 white papers, I think, right now. There's 3 courses from Institute on the Constitution there. I've got another course written that I have to record for myself. It's going to be called Foundations on the Constitution. It's where all of the ideas for the Constitution came from. And then I'm also going to start doing little short, like 15, 20-minute lectures. I've got 3 of those written, and they're going to be up there in video form. Plan on selling the lectures for $1, courses for $5. Become a member, and you get different groups of stuff for free with a monthly membership fee. But yeah, there's lots of stuff. There's free stuff to download and read and study, and then there's stuff that I'd like to make $1, at least cover the cost of the website.
Yeah, man, I hope you kill it. You're like I said earlier, you're a wealth of information. I always learn something talking with you. This was great. Like I said earlier, we don't have to talk about the election. These are the more important things than, who called who garbage, right? Like I don't care who called who garbage. It is kind of funny that I don't know if you heard that the White House changed the transcripts of the speech
Oh yeah,
to make it look like he didn't say it was garbage.
there was
I
something
love
about
it.
an apostrophe.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it,
beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
it's funny.
All right, Peter. Until next time, have a good one, everyone.